Hello, and welcome to Intention Ascension. Today, I'm going to talk to you about discipline and trauma. So, I spend all of my free time watching podcasts, listening to other people, getting all my information, taking what fits and leaving what doesn't. And I came across something, and this lady was talking about how discipline without devotion is setting us up for failure because our discipline is stemming from a trauma response. And when I heard that, it hit home. It made me think about our school system and going to college and going through your AA or your bachelor's into your master's and then possibly into your doctorate. And so I'm going to use that as an example to talk about how when we have discipline and we are overcompensating for where we think we need to be, where we are in our lives, comparing ourselves to those who are around us, that it can actually be a trauma response. Now, I've talked about exercising discipline before, and it is incredibly important. It's an incredibly important component of what we're doing when we're setting goals and we're ready to move forward. Oh man, it's saying my internet connection is a little off. So I had this issue and it kind of skipped out one of my videos. I ended up deleting the whole thing. So I'm hoping that now that it's not on the screen, that will happen. Anyways, so going through and being disciplined is an incredibly important piece of getting to where we want to go. The more that we create the energy of what we want, the more that we create this idea of self, then the further along in the process that we are going to get. So when we think about the law of attraction, when we've set our sights on something that we want, when we continue to put one foot in front of the other, it will inevitably happen and we will attract that version of ourselves. But without the devotion of ourself and compassion, love, forgiveness, understanding, the flexibility and resilience to be able to make mistakes and then bounce back and say, okay, whew, not going to do that again. What's next? Or that didn't work out. What's next? Because if we get caught up in those negative emotions, and I just posted a video on transmuting negative emotions or negative thoughts into positive thoughts, because that process is not easy. It can take a very long time to unwire those negative thought processes. And the only way that we can do that is by transmuting that belief system over time, recognizing our self-awareness. How are we responding to our environment? Because anytime that we feel jealousy, shame, anger, fear, that experience is our ability to learn lessons about ourselves, and it's often wired in low self-esteem, low self-worth, lack of compassion, fear of judgment, whatever the case may be. It's different for everybody, and sometimes it's all of those depending on the environment in which we were growing up in and what we've done in our adulthood. For example, when I use school, I also correlate that with my addiction, which came in my adulthood. And I lost many years to the bottle. And I was very hard on myself for that. And that was adulthood trauma. Of course, that stemmed from my childhood trauma. And so we do have different levels of trauma throughout our lives. And we are able to, you can just string a little line on through and understand why this happened, why that happened, how you ended up in this position. I'm sorry, let me get some coffee, or I should probably be drinking water, but that, not probably, I should be. But anyways, so going through and looking at the amount of discipline that I put on myself when it came to getting sober and reinventing who I'm going to be. That was a discipline stemmed from a trauma response out of fear for not being who I thought I was supposed to be, being where I thought I was going to be, or making the money and living in the place that I thought I would be in, raising the family, being married, having all the, the American dream going on for me, because none of that was true. In fact, I had to start over so many times in my recovery, and when I was first trying to get sober. And let me tell you, it gets worse every time you try to get sober, and then you relapse, and it doesn't matter for how long you're relapsing for. It could be 3 days, but let me tell you what, it gets worse. So our consequences, mine were often losing everything. I remember one time I had all my stuff, everything I owned that I had just had to reaccumulate for the third time, in the back of somebody's car, and they parked somewhere that they weren't supposed to park. And I remember going, because we were in a parking garage, and I remember getting up to the floor that the car was on and walking out, and there's the tow truck taking away all my stuff. And I'm just like, gosh. Anyways, so when we look at that school system, maybe you are just getting ready to go into college, or you're getting ready to go back to school, and you're working on your bachelor's. You have some credits that you need to finish. You've got this goal in mind of what you want to do. And then you're thinking, okay, and then I'm going to go on for my master's. I'm going to have to take this test. I'm going to have to take these classes. Maybe I'll have to do mock trials, mock sessions. I'll have to add in a little performance into what I'm doing, because all of those things add extra pressure into where we're going. Maybe you're going to law school. Maybe you want to be a doctor. Maybe you want to be a neuroscientist. Maybe you want to be an anesthesiologist. We have very high level stress jobs that we are trained are going to be what get us the furthest in life. And we don't get the opportunity to try these jobs out. We don't get the opportunity to go and understudy with, let's say, a lawyer for, X amount of time. No, we see them on TV. We get to see them in the TV shows with their one-liners and like closing cases and saving people. And we create our own idea behind what it is that we're going to do without actually being able to live in that experience. And so we put this idea in our mind, like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And it sounds great. It looks great. It's going to be difficult, but not too difficult, because the reward is worth it. And you are up studying for hours and hours and hours, and you're doing practice tests, and you're going into the medical field, and you're memorizing all this terminology, and you just want to be able to help the people around you. And it's all worth it in the end. But you're creating all this stress, and you're creating all this energy. And there's all of these things that you are going through that are keeping you up here in your anxiety and stress and overcompensation of self, without practicing self-love along the way. And so we have this intense energy wrapped around where we are going and who we're going to be when we get there. And that's where the comparison part comes in, because to an extent, school can be kind of the easier part when it comes down to just being disciplined and reading, going over your material, being thorough, writing your papers. And then it comes into the performance part. And if you don't have the self-love and compassion and understanding and confidence and worth, then when it comes into the performance part, you're only going to have so much time before you're no longer going to allow yourself to maybe make mistakes, or go up against other people and allow yourself to not be accurate in what is happening. And these high levels of stress over time cause physical ailments. You will have issues, and it does not matter who you are, if you are operating in high levels of stress for a very long time, you will continue. And we are taught to climb these ladders in order to get to where we want to be, because usually there's a dollar sign that's attached along with our ego to titles that are our gold star for when we get there, that are, this is what you're going to accomplish. This is when you get to go to these dinner parties and tell people who you are and how great you've done, how far you've made it. Your family members get to say all these hoity-toity things about all of your success. And so I also challenge that when you pick out what it is you want to do, if it's something along those lines where you're going to be in school anywhere from 8 to 10 years or 5 to 10 years, then looking at your why. Why do you want to do this? Our why is going to help us. I remember once wanting to go into getting my doctorate of psychology. And my friend had asked me, well, why do you want to do that? And the first thought that came into my head was, well, my dad is a Dr. Brinkerhoff. And so I want to be a Dr. Brinkerhoff. I want to be the next one. I want to follow in his footsteps. It had nothing to do with what I actually wanted to do. And even though in my mind, I was also telling myself, well, that's, the furthest that you can go. I always want to be the best that I can. And whatever I'm doing, I want to take it as far as I can possibly take it. But it was all driven in my ego. And because of that, without working on self-love, compassion, and devotion, all of the work that I would have been putting into what I was going to do would have literally been a disciplined trauma response to not being good enough, to not being efficient enough, to not being smart enough. And when I bring that back into my childhood, he was the one who would consistently compare me to stupidity in many different ways, shapes, and forms. That was the underlining energy that my dad would always bring through. And I love my dad to death. He does not know how to articulate his words in a compassionate way. Like the other day, he said, well, didn't your teachers call you an idiot? You go to school so your teachers can tell you you're stupid. What? Like, no, no, but it just kind of opened up my mind to the type of people he was around. These are memories that he has of being in school, being told that he was stupid, not coming from a compassionate family and understanding and loving home environment. And so I recognize that a lot of the trauma that I have from being a child and constantly being told that I wasn't good enough in so many different ways, that I wasn't smart enough in so many different ways. And to this day, that still be a part of his verbiage because he doesn't know any different. I now understand why I felt I needed to go this far. Now, when we look at the different tracks, and I'll use mine, for example, coming into my field, you start out at the base level, and that's a lot of physical activity. And so I'm using a residential treatment center, for example. You start out at the bottom level, and they have many different names: residential coordinator, residential, well, actually, I don't know. There's a few different names, but then they also change across like state lines. I've been in Arizona, I've been in California, and depending on which facility I'm working at, they are actually have been interchangeable and may mean different things to other people. So I'm just going to start out with the base level, and they are often, running around, keeping things organized. There's a lot of physical activity, typically a lot less documentation that's taking place with that lower level. They're more so organizing, making sure beds are made, electronics are turned in, however the program runs their rules. They're the ones that are going around and enforcing them. They're usually there for the longest amount of hours too. Now, then you move into a counselor running groups, doing a little bit more documentation, doing different activities with the clients, but sometimes mostly focused on substance abuse and addiction. And then you move into therapist, which is where I'm at currently. And we are doing one-on-one sessions. We're also running evidence-based groups. We are communicating with families, so on and so forth. And then that next level is going to be a clinical director, which once you obtain your licensing is when you are able to step into that position and you are able to then become the clinical director, and they oversee everything. And sometimes the clinical director will have a associate clinical director, or there will be a program manager that is alongside of them. And for the program manager, you're usually looking at business school, and then you have the clinical who has gone for their social work, clinical counseling, something along one of those tracks, and they oversee that clinical aspect. And once you get your PhD, you can still do all the same things. And so maybe they will bring you into you'll be ahead of everybody, I would say. If you've got your PhD, that's going to be what makes your resume stand out. It's also going to put far more expectations on you for what you are capable of doing. It creates more expectations for family members not your personal family members, but when you're working with clients' families, on your ability to repair and fix somebody. So going through my substance abuse counseling, I had to do state boards, and I drove myself into utter and complete anxiety, stress. Everywhere I was opening up books. I was making flashcards. I was doing the whole 9 yards. Like, there wasn't a moment that you were going to catch me not studying. I was either taking a free test on my phone. I was printing out paper tests. I remember at one point, on top of everything that I memorized, I went through and found 150 completely different questions and memorized those. I was memorizing pages, almost paragraph for paragraph, and brought me right back into elementary school, and having to recite poems or into, I think I was in a Bible camp or a youth group or something, and we'd have to memorize paragraphs, and it brought me right back to that. And I had so much stress. I mean, I didn't even be at the dog park, just reading books and everything. I did not take a break. And I carried that energy into my first job as a substance abuse counselor. And I put all of this pressure on myself. And in doing so, it was also because I didn't feel that I was good enough. Just because I passed a test didn't mean that I was worthy of helping people overcome their addiction. Now, if I just step down one level, my expectations are super low. They're like, can you make a good scrambled eggs? Or can you make good scrambled eggs and toast? Do you know how to make a bed? I'm like, yeah, I got it. Moving into counseling, it's, can you help me understand why I'm addicted? Can you help me understand why I can't stop using? Can you help me understand why I don't want better for myself? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know, man. I don't know if I can. And that is because I had discipline without devotion to self, without being able to forgive myself for the mistakes that I had made. Now, I didn't lack authenticity. I didn't lack not being able to live in my truth. I shared my story. People knew where I came from. And so that wasn't it. And I felt like as long as I was authentic and as long as I was honest, then people would understand that I do have the capability of helping them. But boom, underneath that, it was actually a trauma response. If people know that I'm in the same boat as they are, and it wasn't too long ago that I was floating in the same boat, then their expectations won't be as high of me. Therefore, if I fail, I won't fall as far. And that is just not the truth. The truth is that we are highly capable and we are worthy, and we need to step into our own power to recognize that we are all here to help each other, no matter where we are, what career path we choose. When we have the understanding and the self-awareness of why we are doing what it is we've set out to do, we can start to build compassion towards ourselves. We can start to make sure that our failures are just that they are just lessons. When we feel angry, when we're in fear, when we have anxiety, when we are feeling shame or guilt, those are our opportunities for growth. And when we start to really evaluate, well, where did that come from? Why am I blushing right now? What am I embarrassed about? Where is this stemming from my childhood trauma? Do I feel like this person is seeing right through me? Are they seeing that I am not capable of doing this? Most likely not. It's you who feels that you are not capable of doing what it is you are doing. So when we're looking at the discipline and it being a trauma response, like I said before, discipline is extremely important. Intention is extremely important. But you don't want to climb the ladder and still feel like you are not good enough to be at the top. Because if you are up there and you are making all that money and you don't feel worthy of it, someone's going to come through and snatch it away from you. You're going to step down when you don't feel like you are worthy enough. You are going to take less than you know that you are worthy of having. All right. Well, I love you guys. I'm going to end it there.